The antiseptic burned into the open wounds on my skin as if it wanted to remind me that I was still alive. The ER lights were merciless, drilling into my eyes, and every flash of brightness seemed to split my skull wider. My ribs screamed with each breath, shallow and uneven, while blood trickled down from my temple into the corner of my mouth. The copper taste mixed with the bitterness of oxygen tubes. My name is Rachel Monroe, 38 years old, and at that moment, I wasn't sure if I was going to make it through the night. They said I was lucky to be conscious, but nothing about this felt like luck. I tried to raise my right arm, but it refused to respond. The doctor muttered possible multiple fractures while a nurse pressed gauze to my forehead. Somewhere in the background, machines beeped rhythmically, but my heartbeat was faster, heavier, out of sync. The image of what had happened only an hour earlier refused to leave me. My sister Victoria's face twisted in rage, her hand gripping the back of a wooden chair, her eyes so wild I almost didn't recognize her. The moment she swung, I had thought for a fraction of a second that she would stop, but she didn't. The chair came crashing into my side, snapping ribs like twigs. When I collapsed, she kicked me hard again and again, shouting that I made her feel small, that I thought I was better than her. I remember the final blow, her boot slamming into my ribs as I gasped, unable to scream. My body went limp. I remember the cold floor and the faint smell of lemon cleaner mixing with my blood. And then, darkness. Now, lying on the gurney, I heard voices, but not the ones I needed. I reached for my phone, my hand trembling, smearing red across the cracked screen. I pressed the one number that should have meant safety. My mother's voice answered calm. Too calm. "Rachel, don't make this worse. Your sister didn't mean it. She's fragile. Please understand." My lips parted, but no sound came. She hadn't asked where I was. She hadn't asked if I was alive. All she cared about was defending Victoria. My hand slipped and the phone fell to the floor with a hollow clatter. That sound felt like the truth finally hitting me. I was utterly alone. The nurse leaned close, her voice gentle. "Do you have anyone coming?" The answer should have been simple. Parents, family, but the words caught in my throat. I whispered, "Probably not." She gave me a look that wasn't pity, but recognition, like she'd seen this story before. That was almost worse. Tears threatened, but I forced them back. I would not cry here, not after that call, not after being told once again that my pain was secondary, invisible, inconvenient. They wheeled me toward imaging. The doctor's words blurred into fragment CT scan, multiple contusions, possible internal bleeding. I clutched at the thin blanket as if it could shield me from more than cold. My chest throbbed with every bump of the wheels over the linoleum floor. I closed my eyes and saw the kitchen again, saw Victoria's rage, saw my parents rushing past me to cradle her trembling body upstairs. I had lain there broken, but they had stroked her hair, shushed her sobs, whispered, "It's not your fault, sweetheart." A part of me wanted to scream, to drag them here, to make them watch as doctors struggled to keep my body functioning. But deep inside, another part already knew the answer. They wouldn't come. They had never come. I was the strong one, the disposable one, the one who could survive anything without help. And now, even when I was nearly beaten to death, they chose her. The nurse stopped briefly and asked softly, "Is there anything else we can do for you?" I wanted to say, "Bring my mother, bring my father, bring anyone who would hold my hand and tell me I mattered." But the truth pressed against my chest harder than the broken ribs. No one was coming from that house. So I whispered the only thing I could. "Water. Please." She nodded and moved on efficient kind in ways my family had never been. As I stared at the sterile ceiling, I felt something shift. Pain roared through me, but beneath it something colder, sharper, more resolute stirred. If I survived this night, it would not be to protect their illusions anymore. If I survived, it would be for me. The gurney rattled to a stop as they adjusted tubes and checked monitors, but my focus was on the phone, clutched in my left hand. My right arm was useless, hanging in a twisted angle against the sling. I dialed again, this time my father. The line clicked after the third ring. "Rachel, it's late." "What is it now?" His voice was clipped impatient, as if I had interrupted a meeting not called from an emergency room with my body broken. I swallowed against the dryness in my throat. Dad, I'm in the hospital. Victoria, she beat me. I can't move my arm. They think my ribs are broken. There was a pause, not of shock, but of irritation. Then the sigh came heavy, familiar. Rachel, you know how she gets. She's fragile. You've always been stronger. Don't make this a crisis. The words sliced sharper than any blow Victoria had given me. Don't make this a crisis. I was staring at the IV drip, the bubbles sliding upward while my chest burned with betrayal. My father's tone wasn't worried, it was accusatory. I had the image of him in his gray slacks and pressed shirt phone tucked against his ear while he flipped through paperwork, already deciding that my broken bones were less important than keeping peace for his precious elder daughter. I managed to croak, "Dad, I could have died," but he cut me off. "Stop exaggerating. You've always been dramatic when it comes to her. She didn't mean it. She just loses control sometimes." Dramatic. The same word they had hurled at me since childhood whenever I dared to react, whenever I tried to point out the obvious favoritism. Dramatic when my birthday was canceled because Victoria had a panic attack. Dramatic when my scholarship award was ignored because she misplaced her wallet. Dramatic now with ribs cracked and blood staining the hospital sheet beneath me. I whispered, "I'm not exaggerating. I'm in the ER. I'm alone." The silence that followed told me everything. He wasn't rushing to his car. He wasn't asking for the hospital address. He wasn't even pretending to care. Finally, he said flatly, "Rachel, don't do this. Don't tear the family apart." Then the call ended. The line went dead. The phone slipped again from my hand, bouncing against the thin mattress. A hollow echo rose in my ears, drowning the sound of the machines. My own father had chosen her. Not even hesitated. Chosen. It wasn't new, not really, but hearing it while I lay, battered and half-conscious, carved the truth into my bones. I wasn't the daughter to protect. I was the buffer, the wall that absorbed the impact so Victoria could fall safely into their arms. A nurse walked in and picked up the phone for me, placing it back by my side. "Family coming?" she asked gently. I stared at her, unable to form the lie. "No," I whispered. She gave me a look of quiet recognition, a soft nod, then moved on with her tasks. That single gesture felt more like care than anything my parents had ever given me. I pressed my head against the stiff pillow, every inhale stabbing through my cracked ribs. My mother's voice telling me not to make it worse. My father's voice calling me dramatic. Those words looped in my mind, louder than the beeping monitors. The betrayal was total, and the weight of it pressed down harder than the oxygen mask. For years, I had told myself that someday they would see me. Someday my pain would matter, but tonight made it clear it never would. Lying in the hospital bed with morphine dulling the sharp edges of my pain, I couldn't stop the reel of memories flooding in. It was as if my body had cracked open, not just in flesh and bone, but in memory, every old wound rushing back to remind me that tonight wasn't a mistake. It was the inevitable conclusion of a life lived in the shadows of my sister, Victoria Monroe. From the time we were children, the pattern had been set. Victoria was the golden child, the sun around which the family revolved. She was spirited, artistic, sensitive, our parents said. They adored her outbursts, called them signs of creativity, of brilliance. I was practical, quiet, dependable. At family gatherings, they introduced me as the reliable one, the daughter who never caused trouble. It was supposed to be a compliment, but I learned quickly it was a sentence. Being dependable meant being invisible. I was 8 when I first noticed the imbalance in a way I couldn't explain. My birthday party cake on the table, balloons tied to chairs. Victoria had a panic attack because she lost a game of musical chairs, sobbing uncontrollably. Within minutes, the candles were blown out. The guests ushered home the presents left unopened. "Your sister needs calm," Mom whispered, as if I should understand. I sat at the kitchen table in my paper crown untouched cake in front of me, while Victoria was rocked in Dad's arms upstairs. That was the night I learned to swallow disappointment quietly. At 12, I had my first solo violin performance at the school concert. I practiced for months, staying after school, blistering my fingers. That night, as I stood on stage scanning the audience, I saw empty chairs where my parents should have been. Later, I learned Victoria had misplaced her wallet and spiraled into tears. They left the concert early to console her. "You'll have other performances," Dad told me later. "She just needed us." I nodded because what else could I do? But inside, a hollow ache settled into place. When I graduated high school with honors and earned a scholarship, they clapped politely distracted. That same day, Victoria announced she was dropping out of her second college program because school just wasn't for everyone. They rushed to comfort her, saying how brave she was to admit it, how proud they were of her for following her own path. I stood alone holding my scholarship certificate, wondering why my achievements earned silence while her failures brought parades of support. Financially, the imbalance was crushing. In college, I worked part-time jobs, juggling classes and shifts at the diner to pay tuition. My laptop was falling apart, keys missing, screen flickering, but when I asked Dad if they could help, he told me to check Craigslist. The following week, Victoria's laptop crashed once, and he overnighted her a brand new MacBook. When I asked Mom about it, she said, "Your sister's emotional health depends on her tools. You can handle more than she can." That phrase repeated over and over in my life, "You can handle more." Translation: your pain doesn't matter. After college, I moved out at 19, determined to build my own life. Victoria drifted from job to job, moving back home every time she failed, which was often. She called every environment toxic, every boss abusive, every boyfriend controlling. My parents believed her stories without question, cushioning each collapse with money, with sympathy, with a room waiting in the house I once called mine. Meanwhile, I built stability brick by brick, paying rent on time, saving for my own car, working overtime when necessary. They called me independent, praised my strength, but never offered help. Independence wasn't celebrated, it was exploited. 5 years ago, my parents refinanced their house and begged me to co-sign. "It's just a formality, you're so responsible," Dad said. Against my better judgment, I signed, covering half the property tax each year since. At the time, I told myself I was helping family, being the dependable one again. In reality, I was shackling myself to their dysfunction, financing not just their home, but Victoria's endless second chances. The emotional imbalance was worse than the financial. Victoria could shatter plates in a tantrum, and Mom would stroke her hair. I could quietly hold the family together, and no one noticed. When Victoria yelled, "I hate you all," Dad responded, "She's just sensitive." When I calmly said, "This isn't fair, they called me cold," Victoria screamed I was silent, and silence was apparently more offensive. I remember one Christmas clearly. I had brought homemade gifts, scarves I'd spent weeks knitting after long work days. Victoria didn't buy anything, only handed out IOUs scribbled on scrap paper. My parents fawned over her creativity, hugging her, calling her thoughtful. My scarves were set aside without comment. That night, I sat in the guest room and wondered why I kept trying. As the years stacked, so did the resentment I tried to bury. Every ignored injury, every overlooked milestone, every time Victoria was excused while I was expected to endure. By the time I turned 30, I realized I wasn't their daughter in the same way Victoria was. I was their insurance policy, the reliable backdrop to her chaos. And yet, despite knowing all this, I still came when Mom called. I still brought soup when she said Victoria wasn't doing well. I still tried to be the bridge, the fixer, the dependable one. That's why I was in that kitchen the night Victoria snapped. I thought maybe, just maybe, my presence could calm her. But deep down, I think I already knew the truth. No amount of calm could stop her fury because my very existence was the trigger. As I lay in the ER replaying these moments, the conclusion was unavoidable. This wasn't an isolated attack. It wasn't a breakdown or a mistake. It was the pattern carried to its brutal end. Victoria had been allowed to spiral for decades while I was told to be strong, to be silent, to endure. Tonight was the cost of that silence, written in broken bones and blood. The night it happened had started in the most ordinary way, which almost made the violence worse. I had driven across town after work because my mother had called me earlier, her voice hushed but urgent. "Rachel, your sister isn't doing well again. Could you stop by with some groceries, maybe some soup? You always know how to calm her." That line, "you always know how to calm her," wasn't a compliment, it was an order, and as always I obeyed. The air outside was damp with the first hints of spring rain, but the Monroe house smelled of lemon cleaner and tension the moment I stepped inside. I carried the grocery bags into the kitchen, setting them gently on the counter. The room looked neat, but hostile, the kind of neat that came after a frantic scrubbing to erase chaos. I could still sense it lingering in the air. Victoria was pacing barefoot across the tile, muttering to herself. Her dark hair clung to her damp face, eyes darting as if chasing invisible enemies. "He ghosted me," she hissed, slamming a spoon onto the counter. And the recruiter never called back. Nobody sees my brilliance. Nobody. I kept my voice steady, soft. "I brought soup, Vic. Maybe eat something warm." Her head snapped up and the fury in her eyes made me hesitate. She looked at me like I was an intruder, not a sister. "You think I'm weak, don't you?" she spat. I shook my head, lifting my hands slightly in a placating gesture. "No, I just think—" The microwave beeped suddenly as the timer finished, and before I could finish my sentence, Victoria screamed a raw animal sound and hurled the ceramic bowl across the room. It shattered against the far wall, shards raining down like teeth. I felt my heart race, but I tried to stay calm. "Vic, please. You can't keep living like this forever." The words slipped out before I could catch them. They were the truth, but truth was gasoline to her fire. She froze, her chest heaving, and then her voice dropped into a low growl. "You think you're better than me. You've always thought that." I shook my head, backing a step. "That's not what I meant." But the air had already shifted. Her pupils dilated, her breathing quickened. In one swift motion, she grabbed a wooden kitchen chair, her knuckles white around the backrest. I raised my arm instinctively. "Victoria, stop!" She didn't stop. The crash was thunder. The chair slammed into my right side ribs, splintering under the force. Pain exploded white-hot, stealing my breath. I stumbled, hitting the counter, gasping. She swung again, catching my arm as I tried to shield my head. The crack was sickening, bones snapping under pressure, and I screamed, collapsing to the floor. But she wasn't finished. She kicked me once, twice, her foot slamming into my side. "You ruin everything," she shrieked. "You make me feel small." Another kick knocked the air from my lungs, and I gagged, clawing at the tile, blood dripping from my temple where I'd struck the edge of the counter. My vision blurred and the world tilted. For a moment, her face came into focus above me, eyes, wide, teeth bared, almost exhilarated. Then a flicker of horror crossed her expression, but it wasn't enough to stop her. One more kick landed against my ribs, and I felt something shift inside, sharp and wrong. My body gave out. I couldn't even raise my arms anymore. The last thing I remember before the darkness claimed me was her voice, high-pitched and panicked now. She made me feel small. I had to. The sound of her footsteps retreating up the stairs followed, and then silence, except for my shallow, ragged breathing and the drip of blood pooling beneath my cheek. I don't know how long I lay there, half-conscious. Minutes, hours. The house above me vibrated faintly with footsteps, with voices. I thought I heard my parents, Richard and Eleanor, rushing in. Relief surged weakly inside me until I caught their words. "What happened, sweetie?" my mother cried, but not to me. Upstairs, Victoria sobbed. "She provoked me. I didn't mean it." And then came my father's voice, calm, soothing. "It's okay, baby. It's not your fault. We're here." No footsteps came down to the kitchen. No one touched me. No one asked if I was breathing. They were upstairs holding her while I bled out below. It was the neighbor, Mrs. Bennett, who saved me. She heard the screaming and the crash from her porch and dialed 911. When the EMTs burst in, they found me crumpled on the tile, blood in my hair, my arm bent at a grotesque angle, my breathing shallow. They asked my parents what had happened, but my parents didn't answer. They were still upstairs with Victoria, murmuring comfort. The EMTs lifted me gently onto a stretcher, strapping my broken body in place. I tried to open my mouth to call out for my mother, my father, but no sound came. Just blood, just pain, just silence. As they carried me out, I caught a glimpse of the staircase. At the top, Victoria's shadow loomed, my parents flanking her like guardians. She was crying, trembling, and they whispered to her like she was the one in need of saving. And in that moment, broken and barely conscious, I knew I had never mattered in that house. Not then, not ever. When the ambulance door slammed shut and the siren cut through the night, I kept expecting to see my parents appear, frantic, rushing to follow the flashing lights. That's what parents do, isn't it? But as the gurney jolted under me, my broken ribs stabbing with each breath, I realized they weren't there. They hadn't even come downstairs. Later, the EMT told me he'd shouted up the staircase. "We're taking your daughter. She's in critical condition," he said. My father only nodded stiffly, his arm still around Victoria's shoulders. My mother called after him not to ask which hospital they were taking me to, but to ask if Victoria could ride along with them. He told her no, that the ambulance was already full. She looked disappointed that her fragile star couldn't sit front row to my collapse. I drifted in and out of consciousness during the ride, hearing snatches of the EMT's conversation. Possible internal bleeding, concussion, fractured ulna. Their voices were clipped efficient while my parents' voices upstairs replayed in my mind. "It's okay, baby. It's not your fault." Those words were meant for my attacker, not me. When I woke again in the ER, I asked the nurse if my parents had arrived. She glanced at the waiting room and shook her head. "No one's here yet." Her voice was kind, but her eyes carried that same recognition as before, the kind that said she'd seen other daughters abandoned on gurneys while families clung to the ones who caused the harm. Hours later, still no sign of them, but my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Mom. I fumbled to read through the haze of morphine. "Rachel, please don't tell the doctors this was Victoria. She didn't mean it. She's not herself right now. You know how fragile she is." My fingers trembled as I typed back. "I almost died." The screen stayed empty after that. No reply. At dawn, I managed to call home myself, my voice barely more than a whisper. Victoria's sobs echoed in the background as my father answered. "How is she?" I asked, meaning myself desperate for them to care. "She's shaken up," he replied. "She didn't sleep. Your mother and I stayed up with her all night. She feels terrible." He sounded exhausted, but not from worrying about me. "Dad," I croaked, "I'm the one in the hospital." His sigh was sharp, annoyed. "Rachel, don't be cruel. Your sister is suffering too." The words hit harder than the chair had. Cruel. For nearly dying for daring to ask them to care about me. In their eyes, I wasn't the victim, I was the problem. The disruptor, the one threatening the fragile balance of their home. I closed my eyes, every muscle trembling with more than pain. It was betrayal, bone deep. This wasn't the first time, but it was the loudest, the clearest. They had made their choice in that kitchen when they stepped over my blood to reach her tears. They had made it again through the night, holding her, soothing her while I was carted away to fight for breath. And now they sealed it with those words, "Don't be cruel." No one from that house came to the hospital. Not then. Not for days. They left me to mend in the hands of strangers while my sister, the woman who nearly killed me, was tucked under blankets sipping tea my mother brewed. I lay with broken bones and stitches in my scalp, and they worried if Victoria had enough sugar in her tea. It was not neglect, it was allegiance, and it was final. The hours after the attack blurred into one long drip of IV fluids and hushed footsteps in the hallway, but my mind refused to rest. It pulled me backward, dragging me through years of memories that suddenly lined up like evidence exhibits in a courtroom. Every bruise, every silence, every dismissal had led me here. Tonight was not the first betrayal, it was the latest chapter in a book written decades ago. I remembered being 10 years old, running a fever so high my bedsheets were soaked through. My skin was on fire, my throat raw, but when Mom peeked into my room, she said softly, "Rachel, can you keep it down? Victoria is upset because she can't find her favorite doll. Don't make her more anxious." I lay there delirious, learning for the first time that my pain was less important than my sister's tantrum. At 15, I came home from a track meet with a silver medal hanging around my neck, proud and aching from the sprint. Dad barely glanced up from the couch where Victoria was curled crying because she'd failed a math test. "Your sister's very sensitive," he told me, as if that explained why my victory was invisible. Later that night, when she threw her textbook across the room, Mom hugged her and whispered, "You're still brilliant, honey. Don't let grades define you." Meanwhile, I iced my ankle alone medal tucked in a drawer. By 18, the pattern had hardened. When Victoria dropped out of college for the second time, my parents rallied around her with money for therapy, yoga retreats, healing trips. When I got accepted into my university's medtech program, a selective achievement I had worked for years, they smiled politely and said, "That's nice, dear." Nice. A word so flat it almost erased me. Even as adults, the scales never balanced. Victoria could rage, break plates, scream that she hated everyone, and the house would bend around her to cushion the fall. I could ask a simple question, why is she still living here rent-free? And suddenly I was cold, dramatic, heartless. My parents told me, you can handle more. She can't. It became their mantra, a justification, a weapon. The financial tether was worse. 5 years ago, when they asked me to co-sign their mortgage, I hesitated. But Dad pressed, "You're the responsible one, Rachel. We just need your name, just a safety net." Against my instincts, I signed. And from that day forward, I wasn't just the dependable daughter, I was their bank. Every year, I covered half the property tax. Every time Victoria overdrafted her account, I transferred emergency funds. When my own car broke down, I patched it together with duct tape and late-night bus rides, while Victoria got a new lease co-signed by Dad, rent-covered just until she finds a stable job. I told myself I was helping that family meant sacrifice, but each sacrifice only fed the monster, gave her more room to flail while I shrank smaller and smaller. And then there were the emotional cuts, quiet but sharp. At Christmas, when I gifted knitted scarves, I'd spent weeks making my parents set them aside without comment. Victoria handed out IOUs scribbled on napkins, and they praised her creativity. On my birthday last year, I hosted a dinner. Halfway through, Victoria stormed out after a minor disagreement, and my parents followed her into the night, leaving me to blow out candles alone. Each time I told myself it didn't matter, that I was strong enough, that this was just my role. But lying in that hospital bed, bandaged and broken, I saw the truth too clearly to ignore. It wasn't love that kept them circling her. It was dependency, a toxic orbit they couldn't escape. And it wasn't strength that kept me enduring. It was silence. Silence they counted on. Tonight, that silence had nearly killed me. The first visitor, who wasn't carrying a chart or syringe, arrived just past midnight. I thought the medication haze was tricking me when I saw her figure in the doorway, but it was real. Leah, still in her scrubs from the night shift, her face tight with worry. She crossed the room quickly and sat beside me without speaking. She didn't have to. The warmth of her hand on mine steadied me in a way my parents' voices never had. Leah had worked with me for 5 years at the hospital. She'd seen me patch wounds, calm, frantic patients, and stay late long after my shift was done. She also knew the quiet way I spoke about my family, always skimming over details, always downplaying the weight. When she looked at the chart clipped to the end of my bed and saw the word assault, she didn't ask questions. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm so sorry." Tears stung my eyes, not because of pity, but because she saw me something my own parents had never done. She leaned close. "That wasn't an accident, Rachel. That was assault. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words sank into me like medicine stronger than morphine. The next morning, another ally appeared, Denise Calhoun. Just seeing her name pop up on my phone had been a risk. I hadn't spoken to her since she helped me in a legal dispute with a landlord years ago, but in the hours after my parents dismissed me, I had scrolled through my contacts, desperate for someone who might believe me. When she answered on the second ring and told me to forward everything, her voice calm and steady, I felt the first spark of control. Now she stood in the hospital room, dark hair tied in a knot navy blazer sharp against the white walls. She didn't waste time with sympathy. She pulled up a chair, opened her tablet, and said, "Tell me everything." I told her about the kitchen, the chair, the kicks, the blood. I told her about the silence upstairs, about the phone calls where my parents called me dramatic and cruel. Denise typed quickly, nodding occasionally, her face never flinching. When I finished, she locked eyes with me. "Rachel, this is a textbook pattern enabling gaslighting, emotional neglect. It won't stop unless you make it stop." Her words chilled me, but they also sparked something else. Resolve. For so long, I'd thought I just needed to endure to be stronger, to keep the peace. But Leah's steady hand and Denise's sharp clarity cut through that illusion. Leah returned that afternoon with coffee and whispered fiercely, "You don't need their approval to protect yourself." Denise slid a document across the tray table, a draft motion for a restraining order. Start gathering proof photos, messages, medical records. Don't erase a thing. Your silence is their weapon. Break it. I looked at both of them, these women who weren't bound to me by blood, but by choice. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't entirely alone. My parents had abandoned me, yes. But strangers had stepped closer. Colleagues, friends, a lawyer who believed me. Maybe that was what family really was, the ones who showed up when blood was still drying on your face. As the sun set, painting the hospital windows orange, I whispered to myself, "No more silence." My voice was hoarse, my ribs ached, my head pounded, but the words were steady. Leah nodded, her eyes shining. Denise clicked her pen. The war had begun, and for once, I wasn't fighting it alone. The next morning, I woke to the dull ache of my ribs pressing against the cast of gauze that wrapped my chest. Sunlight leaked through the blinds, thin and indifferent. For a moment, I lay there numb, until Denise's words from the night before cut through the fog. Your silence is their weapon. Break it. I reached for my phone with my good hand. The screen was still cracked, streaked with faint lines of dried blood, but it lit up. The first thing I opened was my email. 2 days earlier, Mom had written asking if I could help cover Victoria's car payment again. I had replied yes, like I always did. Now I forwarded that email to a new folder titled Evidence. My fingers trembled as I hit send, not from weakness, but from a strange, fierce energy. Next, I opened my photo app. I angled the phone carefully, snapping shots of the bruises along my ribs, the swollen arm immobilized in its sling, the stitches crisscrossing my hairline. Each click of the shutter felt like a declaration, I will not be erased this time. Then I photographed the hospital wristband and discharge notes the nurse had emailed me closed, head trauma, fractured ulna, multiple contusions. Cold clinical words that translated into the story of survival my parents would try to deny. The phone buzzed with the voicemail notification. My stomach clenched as I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room, soft but damning. "Rachel, don't make this worse. Your sister didn't mean it. Please don't exaggerate." I replayed it twice, letting the words brand themselves into my memory. Then I saved it, locked it, and uploaded it to the folder. Later that day, Denise returned with her tablet. She scanned the folder I had begun nodding. Good. This is leverage. They'll deny everything. Gaslight, deflect, minimize. But facts don't bend. She opened a new document. We'll file for a restraining order citing your medical records, the neighbor's testimony, and this voicemail. We'll also begin disentangling you financially, mortgage accounts, all of it. Her confidence was a lifeline, but doubt still gnawed at me. They'll say I'm destroying the family, I whispered. Denise's eyes hardened. Rachel, they already destroyed it. You're just refusing to bleed quietly anymore. Leah arrived that evening balancing 2 cups of coffee. She set one in my hand, careful not to jostle the IV. I talked to Mrs. Bennett, she said quietly. She's willing to testify. She told the EMTs exactly what she heard. They'll back you up. My throat tightened. The idea that anyone outside these walls believed me felt almost unreal. As night fell, I sat with the phone in my lap scrolling through years of text messages. Pleas from Mom. Can you cover her rent this month? She's really struggling. Demands from Dad. Just be patient. She's sensitive. You know how she gets. Apologies from Victoria, always followed by more explosions. I saved them all. For the first time, I wasn't deleting, wasn't erasing. I was building a record. Somewhere between the morphine haze and the relentless clicking of the photo app, something shifted inside me. Gathering proof wasn't just about preparing for court or restraining orders. It was about reclaiming the story. For years, they had written me out, cast me as the strong one, the silent one, the one who could take it. But now, I held the pen. When Denise left that night, she paused at the door. This will get messy, she warned. They'll guilt you, smear you, maybe even beg. Are you ready? I thought of the phone calls of my mother's text urging me to protect my sister of my father's voice, telling me not to be cruel. Then I remembered the chair crashing into my ribs, the blood pooling on the tile while they rushed upstairs to comfort her. I lifted my chin despite the pain. Let them scream. I'm done bleeding quietly. 2 days after the attack, the hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and oatmeal Leah had smuggled in from the cafeteria. I was propped upright in bed, cast heavy on my arm stitches tight across my scalp, when the door creaked open. My chest tightened instantly. My father entered first, his gray slacks pressed button-down crisp as if he'd come straight from church. His tie hung loose, a performance of rushed concern. My mother followed, clutching a paper bag that smelled faintly of banana bread. Behind them came Victoria oversized sunglasses, masking her bruised pride lips trembling in a carefully rehearsed pout. No one asked if I was okay. No one acknowledged the bruises blooming across my face, the cast pinning my arm, the IV tethering me to survival. My father cleared his throat, scanning the room like it offended him. My mother placed the banana bread on the side table. "Sam's very sorry," she murmured, slipping into the wrong name, the favored name. She caught herself. "Victoria's sorry. Aren't you, sweetie?" Victoria didn't answer. She just nodded once, lips pressed tight, tears glistening behind the lenses. I stared at them for a long moment, heat rising in my chest. "She beat me nearly to death," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my ribs. "I could have died." My father's jaw tightened. "Rachel, that's not fair. You provoked her. You've always known how sensitive she is." The words landed like fresh blows. Provoked. As if I had leaned into the chair, begged her to shatter my bones. My mother chimed in, voice dripping with rehearsed patience. "She wasn't herself. You know how overwhelmed she gets. Don't be cruel." Cruel. For surviving. For refusing to bleed quietly this time. Slowly, I reached to the drawer beside me and pulled out the folder Denise had prepared. My fingers trembled, but not from weakness, from resolve. I handed it to my father. He hesitated, suspicion flickering in his eyes, then opened it. Medical reports, photos of bruises, x-rays of fractures, the discharge notes. He looked up sharply. "What is this?" "Evidence," I said. "I'm filing a restraining order." My mother gasped. "Rachel, you're blowing this out of proportion. She needs help, not punishment." I didn't answer her. Instead, I picked up my phone and pressed play. My mother's voice filled the sterile air. "Rachel, don't make this worse. Your sister didn't mean it. Please don't exaggerate." Then Victoria's voice followed, raw and damning. She made me feel small. I had to do something. My father's face blanched. "You recorded us." I met his gaze unflinching. "You always said I overreacted. I just wanted the truth this time." Victoria tore off her sunglasses, tears spilling. "You don't understand what it's like to feel everything all the time. I was in pain. I snapped. I didn't mean it. But you can't do this to me." My voice didn't waver. "I'm not doing anything to you. You did this to me, and now you face the consequences." My father stepped forward, voice rising. "After everything we've done for you, the support, the money, the roof over your head, this is how you repay us." I raised my good hand, cutting him off. "The support you gave was never to me. The money always went to Victoria. And I haven't lived under your roof in almost 20 years. You raised me to be responsible so you could ignore me. You called me strong because it was convenient. You never saw me." At that moment, the door opened again. Denise entered calm and poised her blazer sharp against the fluorescent light. She stood just behind them, voice steady. "Good afternoon. I'm Rachel's attorney. As of this moment, she has revoked all legal and financial access, including co-ownership of the house, shared accounts, and any future medical or legal authority. Rachel is no longer responsible for either of you in any capacity." My mother reached for my hand desperately. "Rachel, we're family. You can't just walk away." I pulled my hand back, every movement aching but deliberate. Family doesn't mean letting someone hurt you and calling it love. Victoria sobbed harder, mascara streaking down her cheeks. My father looked as if he'd been slapped, his authority crumbling under the weight of facts he could no longer twist. Denise's voice was cool, final. "Please leave. This conversation is over." They shuffled out slowly like actors stumbling off stage after forgetting their lines. The door shut behind them with a decisive click. The silence that followed wasn't crushing. It was cleansing. For the first time in my life, silence wasn't punishment, it was peace. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just breathed. Each inhale, though painful, tasted like freedom. That night, staring at the ceiling, I replayed their faces, the denial, the accusations, the shock when they realized I wasn't bending anymore. They hadn't expected me to fight back. They never thought I would. But I had, and I would keep fighting, because I wasn't their silent daughter anymore. The day after the confrontation, the fallout began. Not in my hospital room, but in the world outside where reputation was currency and my parents still believed they controlled the story. The first blow came through Facebook. My mother's account, her profile photo, the same smiling portrait she used on every Christmas card, carried a vague but poisonous status. Sometimes the ones you love most betray you the deepest. Prayers for our family during this difficult time. The comment section bloomed within minutes. Dozens of church friends, neighbors, distant cousins chimed in with heart emojis, Bible verses, and words like, "Stay strong, Eleanor." God sees your pain. Not one mentioned me. Not one asked what had happened. Hours later, Victoria added her own post, a carefully staged photo of her on the couch, wrapped in a blanket mug of tea in her hands, eyes swollen from practiced tears. Her caption, "Trying to heal from emotional trauma." Some people love to kick you when you're down. Please send light and understanding. The comments poured in, friends and acquaintances echoing her victimhood, calling her brave, strong, misunderstood. My stomach churned as I scrolled stitches, tugging with every pulse of anger. By evening, my phone buzzed with private messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Some scolded me gently. "Rachel, don't let outsiders destroy family bonds." Others outright accused. "How could you humiliate your sister like this? She's always been fragile. You of all people should know better." Each word was another reminder that the narrative had been spun and I was cast as the villain. But then, amid the flood, a different kind of message appeared. My cousin Hannah wrote privately, "I always wondered why you were so quiet at holidays. It wasn't peace, was it? It was survival. I see you now." Another cousin messaged, "We believed their version for too long." "I'm sorry, Rachel." For the first time, cracks appeared in the facade my parents had built. Leah sat beside me as I scrolled, her face hardening with every new post. "Let them talk," she said firmly. "You don't need to respond. They're screaming into a void. Don't give them oxygen." Denise echoed the same when she visited that night. Smear campaigns are predictable. It's the last weapon of people who know they're losing control. Stay silent, stay steady. Facts win in court, not pity posts. Still, the silence I chose was heavy. Every instinct screamed to defend myself, to post my own pictures, my own bruises, my own story. But I remembered Denise's words. Silence is also an answer. My silence wasn't weakness. This time it was strategy. Meanwhile, my parents tried new angles. My father called from a blocked number, his voice clipped. "Rachel, this legal nonsense will ruin us financially. Do you understand what you're doing? After everything we sacrificed." He didn't mention the night in the ER. He didn't mention my broken ribs or concussion. Only money. Only his pride. I hung up without replying. That night, I cried not a graceful, quiet cry, but deep, shaking sobs that rattled my chest and tugged at the cast. I cried for the child who'd been invisible, for the teenager who clapped alone at her own achievements, for the woman nearly killed and still called cruel. And when the tears finally ebbed, I felt lighter, as if grief had been wrung out of me, leaving only resolve behind. The next morning, Denise filed the restraining order formally. Victoria was ordered to complete 6 months of anger management and stay 200 feet away from me at all times. The paperwork went out by registered mail requiring signatures from my parents' address. They could smear me all they wanted online, but in ink and law, the truth was on my side. As I signed my own stack of documents with my left hand awkward but firm, I realized the smear campaign wasn't really about me. It was about their fear. Fear that their scapegoat was gone. Fear that their golden child's shine had been dimmed by evidence they couldn't erase. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of their voices. I was watching their power dissolve. The restraining order was only the beginning. Within a week, Denise had prepared a thicker folder of paperwork than I'd ever signed in my life. Sitting at the small desk in my hospital room, I signed with my left hand, each awkward stroke another fracture line in the chains that had bound me for decades. Power of attorney revoked. Co-ownership of the house dissolved. Bank accounts frozen. Beneficiaries removed. My parents no longer had access to a single corner of my life. It was terrifying. It was liberating. Denise warned me, "They will fight back. They'll try to guilt you, drag you through court, maybe even smear you harder. But the truth is on our side. And you've got something they can't control anymore, documentation." She was right. Days later, the county clerk confirmed the revocation of my name from the mortgage. The tax office acknowledged the stop payment order on property bills I'd been covering for years. For the first time since my 20s, I wasn't financially tethered to a house that had never felt like mine. When my parents received notice, the storm broke. My father left a voicemail thick with rage. "You're destroying this family. Do you understand what you've done?" My mother's voice followed in a separate message, trembling and accusatory. "Rachel, we'll lose everything. Please think of your sister. She can't handle this. I deleted both." Victoria texted from an unknown number. "You've ruined me. I'll never forgive you. How can you do this to your own blood?" I stared at her words, then snapped a photo of my cast and bruised face. I sent it back with one line. "This is what you did to me." Then I blocked her. The legal hearing for the restraining order came 2 weeks later. I walked into the courthouse with Denise at my side, my arms still strapped in a cast, my ribs aching with every step. Leah sat in the back row, her eyes fierce with support. Across the aisle, my parents flanked Victoria, whispering to her like she was a child, her eyes red from rehearsed tears. The judge listened quietly as Denise presented the medical records, the EMT's report, and Mrs. Bennett's testimony about hearing the screaming. Then Denise played the voicemail. My mother's voice filled the courtroom, clear and undeniable. "Rachel, don't make this worse. Your sister didn't mean it." The judge's expression hardened. Then came Victoria's own words. "She made me feel small. I had to do something." My parents shifted uncomfortably, their faces paling. Victoria tried to interject, sobbing that she was fragile, but the judge silenced her with a gavel rap. "This court does not excuse violence under the guise of fragility," he said firmly. He granted the restraining order immediately, his voice echoing like a verdict I had been waiting to hear my whole life. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered, tipped off by someone in the clerk's office. My parents rushed Victoria into their car, shielding her from cameras. Denise guided me past the flashbulbs, whispering, "Let them spin their stories. The record speaks louder." And it did. The local paper ran a short article the next morning, "Woman granted restraining order after violent assault by sister." They didn't print names, but the details were unmistakable. My coworkers read it. My neighbors read it. The pity posts on Facebook suddenly rang hollow. For once, the truth had a megaphone. I began therapy a week later, my cast still stiff, my ribs still healing. Nora, my therapist, asked what I wanted out of our sessions. I told her the truth. "I don't want to be silent anymore." She nodded, her expression gentle but steady. "Then, let's start there." Session by session, we dismantled decades of conditioning. I spoke aloud the things I had swallowed, how my parents only saw me as convenient, how Victoria's crises had become the axis of our lives, how I had confused endurance with love. Each admission was a cut, but also a stitch. Meanwhile, Denise untangled the last knots. She helped me change my will, update emergency contacts, and secure my accounts with layers of protection my family could never breach. One afternoon, she slid the final document across the table. "Every legal tie is severed," she said. "You are free." The words hit me harder than any gavel. Free. Not just from them, but from the silence they had woven around me. Leah celebrated with takeout and cheap champagne, raising her glass in my tiny apartment. To Rachel, finally choosing herself, she said. I laughed at the sound, rusty but real. For once, I felt celebrated not for being useful, but for simply being. Yet healing wasn't immediate. Some nights I woke gasping, hearing the phantom crack of a chair against my ribs. Some days I caught myself almost texting my mother out of habit. The grief came in waves, heavy and choking. But therapy taught me to let it pass. Grief was no longer my home. It was just a place I walked through. 3 months later, the court sent notice that Victoria had violated the restraining order by showing up at my workplace demanding to see me. Security escorted her out. The violation was logged, and the judge extended the order by another year. My parents called it unfair punishment. I called it justice. The real justice, though, was quieter. It was sitting in my therapist's office and realizing I no longer felt the urge to justify myself. It was cooking dinner alone in my apartment and not feeling guilty for eating in peace. It was Leah dropping by unannounced with tea and me realizing that family wasn't blood, it was choice. On the anniversary of the attack, I stood in my kitchen, the one place that had nearly become my grave. Sunlight spilled across the counter, glinting off a vase of fresh tulips Leah had brought. I touched the scar near my temple, a jagged reminder etched into my skin. And I whispered, "I'm still here." For the first time, the words didn't feel like defiance. They felt like truth. 6 months after the night my sister nearly killed me, my life looked nothing like the one I had before. The cast was gone, my ribs had healed into tender lines of memory, and the bruises had faded into faint shadows. But the deeper wounds, the silence, the betrayal, the years of invisibility were harder to mend. Healing wasn't quick, but it was real. I moved out of my old apartment into a place with more light, a third-floor walk-up with wide windows that faced a small park. Every morning I drank tea in the armchair by the window, sunlight warming my skin, silence stretching around me like a safe blanket. Silence used to feel like punishment. Now it felt like freedom. Leah came by, often her laugh filling the corners of the news space. Denise checked in too, usually with papers in her bag and cookies from a bakery she liked. They weren't just allies anymore. They were family. Family chosen, not inherited. Family that showed up without demanding blood as payment. Therapy with Nora continued each session, pulling another thread from the tangle inside me. We talked about guilt, about the little voice that still whispered, I had abandoned my parents. Nora always reminded me, "You didn't abandon them, Rachel. They abandoned you when they chose her tears over your blood." Slowly, I began to believe her. I also began writing again, something I hadn't done since college. At first, just journal entries, then essays, then the idea for something larger, a support group. I called it Quiet Strength, a circle for people like me, the strong ones, the forgotten siblings, the children who had been invisible in toxic families. What started as a Google Doc became a website Leah designed. Denise helped file the nonprofit paperwork. Donations trickled in from strangers who had read my anonymous post online and recognized themselves in my story. The first meeting of Quiet Strength was small. 6 of us sat in a borrowed church basement, mismatched chairs creaking a plate of cookies in the middle. One by one, we told our stories. Brothers who got away with cruelty while sisters stayed silent. Mothers who called their children dramatic when they cried for help. Fathers who poured money into the golden child while the strong one patched holes in their own shoes. We listened, we cried, we laughed at the absurdity of it all. And for the first time, I felt I wasn't just surviving, I was building something. Meanwhile, my parents and Victoria continued their campaign. Vague posts, whispered rumors, even letters begging me to come to my senses. One arrived on pale stationery, my mother's handwriting looping across the page. "We're still your family. Don't throw this away. Victoria is sorry. She misses you." I read it once, then burned it in a metal dish on my balcony. Not out of hatred, but out of clarity. I didn't need more conversations that bent reality. I didn't need apologies that were pleas for access. I needed distance. And distance I had. Legal, financial, emotional. For the first time, I belonged entirely to myself. Sometimes I grieved, yes. I grieved the idea of parents who might have loved me differently, who might have seen me as more than convenient strength. I grieved the years I spent being small so Victoria could be large. But grief no longer sat on my chest. It passed through me like a storm moving across open sky. One Saturday afternoon, Leah and Denise and I sat in the park with sandwiches and a blanket. The air was crisp. Children ran with kites, and the 3 of us said very little. We didn't need to. There was peace in simply existing without explanation. As I watched the kite dip and rise against the blue, I thought of who I used to be. The girl who apologized for being too loud, the woman who thought strength meant silence, the daughter who let herself be erased. She was gone. In her place was someone whole, someone free. To anyone still trapped in that role, still bleeding quietly so others can cry louder, I would say this: you don't have to earn love by disappearing. You don't have to prove your worth by enduring pain. You are already enough. And walking away isn't betrayal, it's survival. Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who shows up when the lights go out, who sits with you in hospital rooms, who brings you soup without asking why. Family is the people who see you when others call you invisible. I no longer wait for my parents' approval nor my sister's apology. I no longer beg to be seen. I am seen. By Leah. By Denise. By the circle of survivors in quiet strength. Most of all by myself. And that is enough, more than enough.